morning, good afternoon, good evening. The recent elections in Tanzania have been condemned, roundly condemned, the world over. It turns out that as much as the government in Tanzania denies that there were very few people killed, the truth of the matter is there were a lot of people killed. And the situation there is worrying, to say the least. It turns out that the Tanzanian government recruited mercenaries to do the killing because its own soldiers were refusing to open fire on civilians. This is a very worrying development. Just listen to the documentary of this sad development.
Diamond mines secured while villages burn. And then there's the DRC. Museveni's been playing the long game here since 1996, when he helped Tutsi rebels topple Mobutu. Fast forward to 2025. Muhuzi tweets, border secured, while Ituri stays occupied. Coltan mines hum under commercial veils. Al Jazeera investigations expose the shadow economy. Sand, charcoal, minerals, all flowing through Salim Saleh's Nile agro empire. Nigeria's bandit wars, Mozambique's gas fields, Mali's jihadist insurgency. Everywhere you look, Ugandan mercenaries fill the gaps, when official troops won't do the dirty work, when governments need foreign hands on the trigger. But nothing compares to what just happened in Tanzania. Let's go back to October 29th, 2025. Election day in Tanzania. President Samia Suluhu Hassan wins with 98% of the vote. Even by African standards, that's absurd. Opposition leader Tundu Lissu locked up on treason charges since spring. Chadema Youth Wing hits the streets. Tires burning, posters shredded, chants echoing. This is mainland fury. See, Tanzania's union has an unwritten rule since 1964. Presidents from the vast mainland, Tanganyika. Vice presidents from the Spice Islands, Zanzibar, Nyerere, Mwinyi, Kikwete. All mainland stock. But Samia, born in Zanzibar, she inherited power when President Magufuli died suddenly in 2021. To Dar es Salaam's dock workers and Dodoma's farmer, this feels like colonization. Zanzibar's elite loot our ports while we scrape by on $2 a day. COVID gutted tourism. Inflation devours wages. Abductions hit 83 since Samia took oath. Freedom House labels Tanzania not free. Gen Z, TikTok fueled, Kenya inspired, channels 2024's rage. Hashtag Samia must go trends. Barricades rise. By dawn, October 30th, curfews slam down. Internet blackouts. Army Chief Jacob Mukunda brands them criminals. But here's where everything changes. The Tanzanian Defense Forces, Jeshi la Ulinzi, refuse shoot to kill orders. Videos flood X. Soldiers sipping tea with protesters, chanting Haki Yetu, our rights. Defiance ripples through the ranks. Ethnic ties bind soldiers to the crowds. Samia's in crisis mode. Her own military won't fire on citizens. So she picks up the phone. Calls Kampala. Within 24 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Nsaju's crew, 300 strong, slips across Lake Victoria. No UPDF uniforms, no flags. Unmarked ghosts in civilian clothes. $1,500 per man for 90 days of repression work. They fan out across Dar es Salaam. Morogoro checkpoints. English commands pierce the Swahili streets. Freeze! Down! Locals immediately notice. Hawani wa Uganda. Hawatambui Kiswahili. These are Ugandans. They don't understand Swahili. Viral clips spread. A mercenary fumbling to haggle for mandazi. Fried dough. Exposed mid-raid because he can't speak the language. In 72 hours, Opposition groups tally 700 dead. The UN verifies 500 through gunfire and tear gas hell in Shinyanga. Human Rights Watch logs mass graves. Border chases spill into Kenya, killing innocent strays. Today, November 3rd, Samia's swearing-in ceremony. Not at State House, not with diplomatic glamour. At Dodoma's military base, barbed wire, snipers scanning rooftops, those English-speaking phantoms patrolling the perimeter. UN Secretary General Guterres fumes publicly. SADC, the Southern African Development Community, stays silent. But the mainland's roar, it's just warming up. Because what happened in Tanzania isn't an anomaly. It's a playbook, the same playbook used in Kenya in 2024. The Kenya parallel.
The tragedy there is here is a government that is prepared to bring in mercenaries to do its own dirty work. In Zimbabwe, we have had a problem of rigged elections ever since the country's independence in 1980. And we are stuck with that tragedy. SADC and the AU election observers condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections as flawed and illegal. SADC have since produced their report on Tanzania. Both SADC and the AU have also condemned Tanzania's recent elections. And when you see, as happened in Tanzania, the government employing foreign mercenaries, albeit just from across the border in Uganda, to shoot to kill its own citizens. That is a worrying development. In Zimbabwe, of course, we have seen shoot to kill, as happened in 2018. After those elections, and there'd been street protests. The worrying thing is we have got this trend of regimes that believe they have the divine right to rule, and they are willing to shed innocent blood to claim that right. SADC must be worried. The AU must be worried. Because Africa is already facing some serious problems. And the last thing we want is to continue to have these problems. And we can only end these problems by addressing the big issues, the fundamental problems, the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections, which is at the heart of all this violence and tyrannical rules. We are looking at a situation here where SADC and the AU have condemned Tanzania's election as fraud. And if the violence does not stop, SADC and the AU may have to sit down and think about it. Deny Tanzania legitimacy. That could be the only way out. In the case of Tanzania, the people of Tanzania did not participate in the recent elections. I think Tanzania has reached a point that Zimbabwe reached in 2008, when we had their Operation Mafotera Papi by ZANU-PF that ended up killing a lot of people as a result of those violent elections. SADC did the right thing then, and they denied ZANU-PF political legitimacy and forced ZANU-PF to go into the GNU. The important thing here is the GNU was the opportunity for Zimbabwe to implement the democratic reforms which would have ended the ZANU-PF dictatorship. We wasted it. It was our fault. But SADC and the AU had done the right thing. And in this case here, I believe SADC and the AU should bite the bullet and give the people of Tanzania the same opportunity to implement the democratic reforms and get that country back on a democratic footing. It is ironic that our own Vice President, Constantino Chiwenga, attended the swearing-in ceremony of the Tanzanian president. Here he is speaking, commenting on his way there to the swearing-in ceremony. We can't hear anything.
We're all based in Tanzania. So to us, it is something that we wouldn't want to see, because we call Tanzania is our mother of all liberation movements. And I am quite convinced that they will be able to sit down, iron out their differences, and move forward.
It is ironic, of course, that VP Chiwenga should condemn what happened in Tanzania when he and the now president, Emerson Mnangagwa, were responsible for the similar events in 2008. We cannot deny the role they played in 2008. They are the ones who carried out the electoral coup in 2008. Here is Dr. Ibo Mandaza speaking about the 2008 electoral coup.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He phoned Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost election and I concede defeat. and I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns, was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day, when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, "You stay where you are." And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away, no? That's why, yeah. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it. And the report...
The tragedy in Zimbabwe was that as much as SADC and the AU forced Mugabe to go into the GNU and gave us a chance to implement the reforms and get the country back on a democratic footing, we wasted that opportunity. The other tragedy, of course, is that the two individuals who spearheaded the 2008 electoral coup have gone on to become president and vice president of Zimbabwe, respectively. They are the ones who went on to stage the 2017 military coup and installed themselves as president and vice president, respectively. We also have the unfortunate reality that the opposition, who should have used the opportunity of the GNU to implement the reforms, sold out. 2023, the people of Zimbabwe participated in those elections when they'd been warned repeatedly that the elections would be rigged. They participated out of greed. As much as SADC and the AU issued damning reports of the 2023 elections, they could not deny ZANU-PF legitimacy because the opposition participated in those elections in their millions. Chamisa conned his followers that CCC was going to win big. That God was the part of the plan. It was God's plan that Chamisa will form the next cabinet. He was preparing the next cabinet. The people believed him, they participated in those flawed elections only to give ZANU-PF legitimacy.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri plan ya Mwara.
But to get back to our present situation, I believe the way forward is that 2028, we should make sure that we do not participate in the flawed elections. The pressure is mounting on SADC and the AU to really do something about these rigged elections. It is one thing to condemn the elections and do nothing, as they've done in Zimbabwe in 2023, and they've done so far in Tanzania. But as time goes on, the pressure is mounting that SADC should deny those countries that have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections credibility. I believe that if Zimbabweans do not participate in their millions in the 2028 elections, SADC and the AU will deny ZANU-PF legitimacy. It is our responsibility to make sure that that happens. We really cannot afford to perpetuate the present political system. We need to put an end to this madness of rigged elections and violent street protests thereafter. I hope Tanzania is forced to go into a GNU and get their house on order. What has happened in Tanzania is totally unacceptable. And that should not be allowed to carry on. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.